Hello and welcome to episode 2 of our mental health and wellness webinar. My name is Brianna Dolly. I am the Chief Operations Officer of the Global Social Enhancement Corporation, or GSE for short. If you are new to us, we are a nonprofit organization focusing on providing free health education and tutoring services. Today's webinar episode will cover the discourse regarding today's body culture and social media, as well as provide strategies for navigating the intense body culture of today. Today, I also have with me 3 absolutely amazing panelists. Thank you again for joining us. Could you all go around and introduce yourself?
Do you want to tell us who's going to go first?
Oh yeah, sorry. Why don't we just go ahead and start with you if that's all right?
Sure. My name is Emilia Kanawati. I go by Emmy. And I've been a sexuality educator and trainer for over 30 years now. I teach basically K through college students. I teach sex ed. I currently teach a human sexuality course at Vanderbilt University.
Awesome, thank you. Could we go next with Johnson?
Yeah, my name is Johnson Bowen. I'm currently a student at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, studying nursing. Um, I don't have as many degrees as some of the other panelists, but I'm here.
And then with Emily?
Yeah, so my name's Emily Svinovic. I am the registered dietitian for campus dining at Vanderbilt University.
Awesome. Well, once again, we're so thankful to have you all presenting today. So why don't we hop in with our first question of the day? So, how do you think, just to kind of give an overview, today's body culture, both online and in real life, impacts the mental health of students, whether they be college or high school or beyond? And whoever
Jonathan,
wants to.
maybe you should start with that since you're the target audience.
Um, I think that the body culture of today, especially over like online and through like high school and college, as people are starting to form their own opinions of themselves and the world around them, has a great impact on the mental health of students. I know as a current college student and as a former high school student within the last, 2 or 3 years, it takes up a big chunk of your brain, especially as you're like becoming your own self. You're growing up and your body's changing and you're starting to understand that the space you take up and the way that you look and how that compares to everybody around you. So it's definitely a big impact on the health of students. And then having a culture of, well, you should look this way or you should or should not eat these things can definitely have a greater impact as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I think it's interesting too that we have made bodies such a big part of our culture. Um, I mean, it's interesting to see like different cultures' ideal body types and see how different they are across different countries. But I think just that even the not even the way people look, but like how their bodies look is news breaking for some situations. Like I feel like it's an interesting environment we're in right now, where if someone loses weight, gains weight in an extreme amount, that is a headline.
Yeah. I have my students in my class write the first paper that they write is kind of looking at the larger picture of sexuality. And one of the elements of sexuality is body image. And almost to the student, regardless of their gender, although most of my students do identify as female, but basically most folks always talk about the intense feelings, emotions, and pressure that they feel around body image and needing to conform to the ideal of that era, right? And we know that body ideals change over time. They change according to culture. Um, and and I think we're in a particularly intense time. Uh, I think that there's a larger conversation to be had around how closely culture and body image ideals are tied and the conversation that happens between those. And so Um, I just always think it's interesting to look at those two together, because they don't happen in a vacuum.
Absolutely. And I think with
And I
that,
think,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna say also, like, I mean, both of you touched on like the way headlines as well and like culture are so tied to body image. And especially I think that rings true with like GLP-1s, and how like most commercials now are for GLP-1s. Most celebrity discourse is about GLP-1s. And so I thought that was really interesting that you all touched on that.
And the only other thing I wanted to kind of add to that, kind of going what you were saying, Emmy, is just that it is also a culture. Like I think I don't know if it's just the space that I'm in, but I feel like another big part of culture is like needing to be better in a lot of different senses of like career. You need to do all these things to get to your next spot. You need, it's like that hustle culture, but then that bleeds into other areas of our life too. And so when you see body image and ideals change of like super thin or super muscular or however that looks, it's like okay, you're always trying to achieve the next thing instead of just like being where you are.
Yeah, yeah. And I think particularly at Vanderbilt, at least this has been my experience. So Johnson, curious to hear what your experience is, but Vanderbilt students seem to be very high achieving and that pressure. And so that just bleeds into everything, right? And oftentimes I think what happens with the body, right, is when a lot of things feel out of control, we somehow feel that we can control the body. And we do that through, eating and restriction and harming oftentimes. So all kinds of ways. The body is just like this, it's almost um, like a canvas upon which we write a lot of what's happening in culture. So I'm curious to hear what you think, Johnson.
I actually really like the way you said it about like students and specifically these people that are high achieving treating their bodies as like canvases and like the way that your body looks or the way that you treat it can go along with that culture of trying to grow and be better and higher achieving and all those things. And sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I really like what you said about bodies being a canvas and how like it's a form of control for students who may feel like in a world where they don't have a whole lot of power or influence, that's the one thing they can control.
Mhm.
And I've also noticed even just like from speaking with students too, especially in a school setting, and that like sense of control, whether it's political or academic, like in any sense, if there is a feeling of not being able to control that, it reverts to internal and then body. So I think it's you can almost, which is, I mean, hard because you could make an out of control situation for anyone and many people would have multiple. So I think it's just something that you're always with yourself. And so it's easy to turn to yourself and like pick apart your body and try to make that better when everything else feels like it's a mess.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think the GLP-1s, whew, it's such a, I'm interested, Emily, like what you're seeing at, how that's potentially bleeding in. I don't know if students are making requests in terms of food or if you're seeing differences in terms of the amount of food that people are consuming. And it's just, I feel like we could spend 3 hours just on that topic, but yeah.
Yeah, I was actually just speaking with one of our chefs today about it. I haven't seen many like student request accommodations, but I'm sure that's in time. But I would also be interested to see just because like portions are going to be smaller and I am interested if we do any like food waste studies or things like that of seeing
Mhm.
comparing, the past couple of years when we've really honed in our like post-production things, but the consumer side, making sure that we're not like over serving portions, but also you have to make sure you're giving people enough too. And so
Yeah.
it's an interesting balance, but it would be really cool to see kind of what the numbers look like if there's a lot more post-consumer waste with all the rise in GLP-1s.
Yeah. I mean, I just see it with my friends, right?
Yeah.
Who, when we go out for meals, and if they're on a GLP-1, like 3/4 of that food is being wasted, you know? And mind you, the thing is, we've also like historically, particularly here in the United States, like we've had this conversation for so long about portions and, that, we serve enormous portions in most places when folks go out. So it's just, it's just extremes. That just seems to be the American culture overall.
Most definitely. So, with this discussion of like students or just young people in general kind of viewing their body as this buildable canvas, something that is they're using for control or that they're adjusting as they're kind of growing, how would you say both like nutritionally or mentally you see that impact younger audiences in the long run?
I think nutritionally, it could have some big consequences if not monitored well. I think it's an interesting spot to be into because I think anyone on a GLP-1 for the most part tends to undereat what they need. And it's hard to because if you're not working with a dietitian or closely with a doctor who has nutrition background, you could be missing out on major micro and macronutrients. So for example, like you could have it's not just calories, right? So it's like you can eat enough calories, but if you're not getting the right nutrients from those and not eating nutrient dense foods, then you're going to be missing out on a lot of things, which is especially concerning for growing bodies just because you need more. And like if you're young, lack of nutrition really impacts hormones and development, and that can lead to impacts further in life. So especially for females, like if you lose your period, and then that could lead to like infertility things down the line. And it is something that seems so harmless and like it's kind of like when you're young, you don't think about saving for retirement. When you're young, you don't think about me taking this weight loss drug is going to impact the potential of me having children or a family later. And it's those things where we've made it so innocent in our culture to be on a GLP-1. It's not a big deal. Everyone's on it. And so you don't really think of all the impacts that could happen. So it is a little scary for like younger people, or again, if you're not working with a professional to make sure you are getting what your body actually needs.
Yeah, I think that like you're saying with the nutrients especially, and for younger people that growing up with this culture surrounding of like changing how your body looks and weight loss drugs and all these other things, it creates different mindsets and cultures and complexes that then shape how you view not other people, but yourself specifically of, well, if I'm doing this and everybody else is doing this and they look like that, maybe I should be doing that they are too.
Yeah, I think of it from a parenting perspective. The thing is, I think overall as a culture, we've never had a particularly healthy relationship with food and bodies. Um, I, I'm not even sure. I'm not sure that I can point to a culture where that's the case, but I can speak to this and where I grew up. Um, so it's just exacerbated a lot of the issues that we see. And I think back, some of the images that we're seeing now of particularly celebrities, because I guess that's what we see, who are on these, and folks who are already considered to be, sort of have a standard, quote unquote, standard bodies, and just looking emaciated. I mean, and Emily, you probably know more about this. Just like, I mean, meeting definitions for clinical anorexia, but these are being held up as and being celebrated, right? And we know that these things affect young people for sure, and so it's just exacerbating a lot of the problems that I think we've seen. And yeah.
Most certainly. And then, like, on top of that, I'd love to touch on kind of like specifically the ties into academic performance as well. Like, when you start controlling body image, have you guys seen that blend into also then putting additional pressure on academic performance? I know we already kind of touched on this, but I'd love to hear more.
I mean, when you think, go ahead, Johnson.
I was just gonna say that I haven't seen like a super strong correlation between the body pressures and academic pressures put on each other, but then again, it's kind of hard to watch those things as you're in them. As I mean, as a college student, I know me and my friends, we're all very academically focused, and so it's kind of hard to determine if it's, that desire to do good in academics on your own accord, or if it's other pressures being compacted from other facets of your life.
Mm. Well said.
And I think too, like more like the literal side of it, of if you're controlling your body by under eating and under nourishing it, that will impact your performance in life in general, including academics. And I think a lot of times students don't make that connection. It's like, I'm tired all the time. I'm just going to have another energy drink, more caffeine, whatever it may be. And it's like, maybe it's because we're not eating enough and your brain uses like 20% of your body's energy that you intake. And so if you're not feeding it enough, it's already not getting enough. You're not going to be performing at your best. You're not going to be academically performing how you want to. And then that can lead further into like, okay, I need to study more or put more pressure on myself. So it's kind of a vicious cycle when it can all really just stem from making sure, again, you are getting the foods and nutrients that you need. So I think it being on GLP-1s, but again, just more so controlling what you're eating and like not eating enough can really impact that as well.
Yeah, certainly. So now kind of going into what can we do to change this? Because obviously we've talked about in depth now what's been going on, how it's impacting people, and how, like you said, it's a very vicious cycle that is very difficult to control and very difficult to maintain. Are there any strategies you could provide to students to help try to build a more positive relationship with their body?
I mean, that's a dissertation. Yeah. So one of the things that I share with my students is one of the, what some research has shown that particularly in terms of social media, um, if you add in some more body positive or body neutral accounts and you sort of follow those and sort of put it into the mix of what you kind of pay attention to, that it does seem to shift people's attitudes and feelings. Um, I wonder that this is research that's a little bit older. The way I wonder, and I haven't done any more recent research on this, and if anybody knows, but I wonder what the algorithms do now, because they seem to be switched so quickly. I mean, literally, I'll like watch my daughter who's 18 and in college now, like, oh, I need to fix my algorithm. And it's like within seconds, and it's like, wait, what? Um, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work now, but basically, this idea of just kind of paying attention to how you're feeling and what your thoughts are and what your self-talk is around your body, and just being aware of that, and then figuring out like what is impacting that. If it's super negative, like how can you change that environment for yourself? How can you pay attention to the self-talk and shift that as well? Because that's so powerful. Also, the people around you, right? Like, what are your peers doing? What are they talking? One of the rules in my house when my daughter was growing up is we don't talk about other people's bodies. Like, I just, I don't tolerate that talk around me. We don't talk about other people's bodies, both positively or negatively. I don't comment on other people's bodies. And so really just kind of getting out of that mindset. I don't know if other folks have ideas.
I think you said that really well. My initial thought with that question was without a greater culture change, it's going to be a lot more difficult to make smaller, more like single person changes. But I think kind of like what you said with the mindset that you hold and the environment you're surrounding yourself in and the people that you put yourself with. can kind of create your own culture change, even if the larger culture isn't affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's hard too because if you it's like that double-edged sword of like if you're in that space and you kind of like it because you want to achieve this ideal, but then you also know it makes you feel bad, but like which it's like the devil and angel on the shoulder of like which one's going to win, right? And so you have to have the mindset of like if you're on social media and you see something that makes you feel like that, it's like you can unfollow or block or mute, or you can mark posts as not interested, but you also have to do that. And social medias make that really hard to do that. And like you have to click multiple buttons to get there. And I think, like you said, I mean, like not commenting on people's bodies, but I think also not commenting on foods and like saying what's good or bad or what you did or didn't eat today. Like
Yeah.
you don't know what someone across from you ate. If they finish their plate, you don't know if this is their first meal, their set, like, and it doesn't really matter either
Yep.
to you. And so I think kind of refraining from that. And I think it's hard when, and I noticed this within my own friend groups, especially like now after college and we've all kind of like moved on, but then whenever we come back together, just like the comments that come up, and it's hard to steer conversations away.
Yeah.
And like because it can be really awkward sometimes to be like, I actually don't want to talk about food or I don't want to talk about bodies, but you don't want to be that person because then it makes it feel weird, right? And so it's kind of navigating like, do you just change the topic? Do you have a rebuttal to that? Do you be really blunt? Like, there's a lot of ways you can go about it, but I think having those conversations with people is also really important.
Yeah. So it's one of the things I talk with my students in my sexuality class so much is so much of life is awkward and difficult and uncomfortable. And I fear that I think, and Johnson, happy to hear, and also from you, Brianna, because you seem to be in that same age group, like this ability to withstand that awkwardness and discomfort is seems harder than it has been in previous generations. And so really being able to sit with that discomfort and just being willing to have those tough conversations and still continue in relationship, right? Like you don't have to, so this whole concept of, protecting your peace, and so I'm just going to move away or avoid, I just think can be really damaging overall, because you can't keep doing that in life. And sort of just, this talk about bodies and food just really makes me really uncomfortable. Can we just talk about something else, right? Or finding your own voice in that, but really just being able to sit with that, I think, is a really good skill to have in life, and a good muscle to grow. And I talk about this in the context of sexuality, because I always say, we're really great at doing sex in this culture, but we're terrible about talking about it. And so let's let's get comfortable or more comfortable if we can. So thanks for that, Emily.
I really like how you put that as like a muscle to grow, because it
Yeah.
truly is. Like I'm pre-med, but I'm actually also a theater major. So it's like usually I kind of live for those awkward, weird moments where I'm doing something very uncomfortable in front of a very large audience. So that's something I really enjoy. But even like if I'm around new people or in like a smaller setting that isn't theater, like those awkward conversations are still very awkward and can become very uncomfortable very quickly. And so I think that also in itself can be a strategy to improving the culture around yourself, is just working on being comfortable with those awkward conversations, because the fact is that they will have to happen if you want to change this body culture. So I really like that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually kind of like what you were saying about just withstanding the awkwardness. I went to school, I go to school in Chattanooga, but all of my friends either went to Vanderbilt with y'all or up to Knoxville, which is where the majority of them are. So, I mean, you go off and you don't see them for 4 to 8 months, and then so things change. And so like we actually had a big conversation kind of a couple weeks ago, maybe a month now, where it was just like it's so much easier to get through those awkward conversations if you're being your authentic self. Like
Mm.
if if I am me and I don't care, what they think about me, then it makes those awkward things easier because it's like, well, this is how I look, this is what I want to eat. What you say about it really isn't going to impact me.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, that's easy to do with friends.
Mhm.
But then if you get in other larger situations with people that you're not as comfortable with, I mean, these people I've known since I was like 4 or 5. So it's a it's like they know what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But with like other people, like Bree, when I first met you 2 months ago, I mean, I'm sure if we had these conversations, it'd be a little difficult, a little awkward, kind of uncomfortable.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, when you think about it, right? Most of us are going to be with people that have not known us our whole life most of the time. So
Yeah,
hence the importance of being able to do that.
yeah,
And sometimes too, I think that people like to start conversations about like wedge their way in starting with something that like they want to know more about, right? And so like from my personal experience, it's like at work, if we have people who are wanting to lose weight, they're going to start talking about food and things like that because that's what's on their mind, right? And like even if they're doing it in a healthful way, not everyone is experiencing what they're experiencing, and it's like we don't need to talk about that at lunch. We don't need to talk about your diet, your meal plan. And I think it's also different for myself because I am a dietitian and like maybe they want questions or advice, but I also like I'm not going to give you unsolicited advice unless you ask for it. And so it's one of those things like I don't know if it's eliciting a comment or like praise in some sort, and I think that can kind of everyone has one of those friends that kind of fishes for compliments, And so I think sometimes it can come from that too. Like, oh, I've lost weight and I want someone to notice. So I'm going to talk about my body or someone else's body and then get what I want from it too. So it can be like, I don't know, it's hard to navigate, but I think understanding where people come from too can be a good way to kind of start the conversation that way as well.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think on top of that also, like, I'd love to hear what you guys think too, because I feel like navigating this issue, especially in conversation, can also be very different for men and women. Like the underlying reasons are very, very similar. And I think that's why it's important to talk about in tandem. But I feel like the way society receives discourse about this between men and women is very, very different.
I mean, we don't have to go further than the dad bod. I mean, I just like I've never seen an average an average woman's body being held up even neutrally the way that dad bod has been held up. It's just like wow. Um but I just want to say like I think it was maybe about a year ago, I had a student who brought the concept of looks maxing to my attention, which I did not know about. And so I was like, this culture is so toxic to everybody, regardless of your gender. I think maybe the slight difference is for women and girls is that it starts much earlier and it's much more pervasive and ubiquitous. Whereas I think oftentimes for boys, it it starts coming on a little bit later. This pressure is what I've sort of seen. Is that do you what do you think, Johnson?
no, I agree with that, and I haven't really. I mean, everyone's aware that there's different pressures for different genders, but I didn't really think about it in the way of, well, it's not really put on to men as early as it is for women. I mean, that in the back of your mind, that's a fact. But think about it as like, I mean, you can think about situations from elementary even where it's like people are making comments on how girls are looking and the way that they do their hair or the size of their bodies. Whereas it's
Mhm.
not really the same thing for the boys in those same
Yeah,
ages and ranges. And I
yeah.
feel like it's also a little bit more critical on women, society is about the standards, whereas men, it can, as long as it's, within this wider frame, it's considered more acceptable.
Mhm. And I still think, I mean, but I do think this is the current trends of the pressures on men and what we're seeing in terms of what it is to be a
Definitely.
man, which which comes along with the body and you know this conversation around like it's only men in this who look like this, who are this tall, who make this amount of money, who have this square jaw, who can get the women. And then I just saw an article about I don't know if it was uh, I can't remember which reality show it is, but they were talking about this reality show where it's these really, really, conventionally good-looking women, and all of their husbands seem to be very average. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, huh. So this whole notion that men have to look a particular way in order to get this particular kind of woman is clearly not true, right? In reality. So so what is the excuse that that these men who seem to be having this difficulty, it's like, well, that kind of falls apart, right? Um, but regardless, like I the amount of pressure to make people feel inadequate in who they are and what they look like and how that gets presented is just so sad to me. And I think it makes people do really unhealthy things and get into unhealthy relationships. And it kind of it scares me, frankly.
And I think it is hard too because growing up, like your body is supposed to get bigger and it's supposed to change. And especially being a female, when your body changes in a lot of different ways, and that's the same time that you get, like Johnson was saying, views from the opposite sex of like if this is good or is it bad, and you can't really control it, or you can sure try, but and it's hard because it's going to change and your body is meant to change.
Yeah.
And I think it's just sometimes hard when it doesn't change the way that you envisioned or the way that society thinks is the right way for it to change.
Yeah.
Most
I
definitely.
agree. And I'd also even wonder, like, Emily, in your profession and role as like you see all these young people, how, I mean, do you notice particularly if like different genders are changing their diets specifically to entertain certain looks or appearances or other goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think the people that I've spoken with fall into what I would consider the stereotype for each gender of like males are kind of wanting to build more muscle, lean out, and have like this more muscular fatigue or physique. And then females are generally just wanting to lose weight. I have had students like females wanting to gain more weight or again build more muscle, things like that. But generally, the majority of people I see kind of fall into what I would consider the two stereotypes of body changes.
Interesting. That's really that's really interesting to think about. Um, on top of that, with like the dieting specifically, I think I would love to hear more specifically from Emily, but also from anyone else who has input. Um, when you're trying to like, gather those like prime nutrients to build muscle for like working out or to just kind of you're monitoring what you want as a healthy diet. I also feel like that can be very like a very slippery slope into monitoring a very strict diet. Do you have any like recommendations or just in general discussion over like finding that balance between what is a healthy way to kind of track those healthy nutrients and a healthy diet before falling into a very strict, calibrated diet?
Yeah. There's a lot of different approaches to it. A lot of times when I first meet with someone, obviously we'll talk through their goals, and I like to talk about kind of their personality type. If they are more of a perfectionist, like they like to follow XYZ, I tend to stay away from calorie counting and like specific macro tracking just because that is what tends to be more of a slippery slope. If we're talking and they're like, if I hit it 80% of the time, that's great. If not, whatever. Then I'm like, okay, we could do this just so you have a general gauge, but it is hard sometimes and takes a lot of mental energy. And a lot of times people are like, I don't have time for that, so I need something different, which is great too. I think if you're wanting to track things, maybe focusing on like one element instead of a lot of different or like everything, that can be helpful too. But I think too, just like knowing how you respond to situations and also like the body that you like your ideal body is not one that is from a life of restriction and over exercise. Like that's not where your body wants to be at. And sometimes that's hard to come to terms with too, of like you living your normal life with a little bit more exercise, a little more attention to the food you're eating, that's great. But if it's extreme restriction, extreme exercising, deprivation of any social or emotional things, that's not where your body wants to be. And so I think kind of coming to terms with that too, of realizing where little improvements can be made or big improvements, but then also again, not going too far. So it is a very personal journey. And I think too, a lot of times our culture is also not great at delayed satisfaction. And so to lose or gain weight in a healthful way, it takes a long time. And a lot of people want it to happen in a month. They're like, I can do it for a month. And if it doesn't come from that, then I'm going to use a GLP-1. So it's things like that where it's like we have to create these small habits and build upon that and have it change our lifestyle, not necessarily like overhaul or complete diet or exercise routine and then expect life-changing results a month later.
Most definitely. I'd love to touch on also, we kind of talked about this earlier with like protecting your peace, but also just being able to handle awkward conversations like that. I'm wondering if any of you have any strategies, I guess, to suggest when talking to someone that is more of, I guess, like a superior to you. Like if you're a younger person trying to talk to your family about the way they might talk to you, especially growing up. I know that's a big issue for a lot of people, is a lot of their body culture might come from the older adults in their life.
Um, the the concept of advocating for yourself is something that thankfully the schools that we chose for our daughter um, were very focused on. I don't know about you all, but I don't know that that's always a focus for adults versus children, right? Oftentimes, adults and parents really just want their children to do what they're asking them to do. Just, because I told you so, or so I it takes, I think it takes this personally. I think it takes a special family, it takes a special kiddo. So ubiquitous, even with folks who quote unquote know better, right? Like it's such an overarching thing that we have here. Um, it can certainly, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
So fair. It's a hard answer to find, honestly, because I mean, this is a conversation I've had with like my parents, my friends as well. Like sometimes as a younger child, I do need some amount of guidance from my parents. Sometimes they are in the right and I don't see that at the moment. But also sometimes a lot of parents can have trouble receiving feedback from their kid of saying, "Hey, what you said is hurtful." And they're like, "Well, this is how I was raised. So I don't see why it's a problem." So I do also think it takes a lot of intense conversation between both the child and the parent to be able to advocate for themselves, but also on both sides be able to receive criticism or feedback and to have open conversations.
And I think it's hard too with especially college students because odds are you're away from your parents for months at a time. And so obviously they're going to see any body changes that like you have been experiencing gradually, but they see the month they dropped you off and the month you're coming back home. So that could be 4 months in between. And if you gained 5 pounds, 10 pounds, it might look different. And if you lost 10 pounds, right? And so even if the comment is like, you look great, whether that's weight gain, weight loss, whatever it may be, physique change, like that alone is a parent just like expressing their love to you of like, oh my gosh, we're so happy to see you. You look great. You look, healthy in whatever way that looks like. But if you got to that point in a bad way, that kind of just feeds the cycle. And so it's hard when it's like, oh, well, I haven't eaten in a week, or I ate so much the past couple weeks. Like, if whatever you did to get there was something that's shameful for you, having that positive feedback of like, oh, you look great, as innocent as it sounds, can then also be detrimental. So it's hard when it's not comments of just like, you look like you gained weight or lost weight, but like it's a comment coming from love and care.
Yeah.
It's hard to balance that.
Yeah. I think in the end, I do believe this. Most parents love their children and want the best for them. And we have, in this culture, we have such a bias for against fatness, and I put that in quotes, that we, calling someone fat is the implication is that it's a negative or a bad thing, as opposed to just a descriptor, first of all. And that the implication is always that any weight loss is good and positive, right? And so parents who are concerned about their children's weight, particularly on, gain weight, I know is coming from a place of love and caring. And it like Emily said, it can have such a negative impact regardless, right? People making comments about somebody's weight loss. They don't know where that weight loss came from or why it's there, or if it even, right? So again, this is the rule in my house is we don't talk about other people's bodies. I'm so glad to see you, right? Like that's the comment, not you look great, because still the focus is on someone, I don't know how someone looks, as opposed to you're just really happy to see them. And keeping it in that lane, I think is important. Personally.
I think that it can be, I mean, and from my experience, it's been very difficult to try and talk to, like you were saying, the superiors, like my parents or, grandparents, even, especially from a much different time, um, on conversations of, what you're eating. Or, I mean, because if you make a plate of food, they're like, oh, well, you're a growing boy. And it's like, well, but like, you don't got to mention whatever. But it can be difficult trying to have those conversations of you don't need to comment.
Yeah.
And then especially whenever, they held you when you were a baby, you're always going to be their baby. They're always going to feel like, oh, I've been here before you even knew what the color red was. Like they're always going to have that kind of feeling of
Yeah.
superiority. So they're not
Yeah.
always going to want to hear your feedback and your comments.
Yeah.
So it can be difficult to try and, limit and
Yeah.
And I think too, like, again, going back to why it can be so difficult for college students going home is that you tend, besides summer, you tend to go home for the holidays, which are centered around food. And so you're making your Thanksgiving plate, you're having your nice Christmas dinner, and like that's the first time they've seen you in 4 months, and you have to eat a plate of food in front of them and your grandma and your aunt, who there's just, there's a lot of things that go into it and a lot of opinions that, again, sometimes you just don't want to hear. And it might not even be directed towards you, right? It could be your aunt making a comment about your grandma or vice versa. And it's like, it's a lot, and it can be a lot.
Yeah.
I really like that you pointed that out as well, because it's like, I mean, we really do. And also, the other thing is we come home and a lot of times, like, I know my parents just want to feed me. They're like, what do you want us to cook? What do you want us to make? And they're just like, we want to feed you. You're at college. We haven't seen you eat. And I'm like, well, I have been eating at the dining halls, but they're like, but we want to feed you. So I think that's really interesting that you specifically mentioned that about college students, because I haven't really made the connection about that, but that really makes sense.
Food is love
Mhm.
across cultures. Like it is, It is the way you make peace. It is emotional, both positive and negative. Food is huge. And it's just it's so powerful.
And I
Absolutely.
think like tying into that too, like that's one of the big talks around holidays and like celebrations in general, especially when talking with people who like maybe want to lose weight or are more conscious about what foods they're eating. It's like one meal is not going to make or break your body at all. And you are sitting across the table from your grandma who's 3 generations older than you. Like that's what should be celebrated. And if you're eating a piece of cake with her, that is amazing. Like that in itself should be celebrated, not don't focus on you feeling guilty about having a piece of cake or whatever it may be, right? And so I think food has a really great way of bringing people together and like celebrating things, but unfortunately, it's also become really negative and a point of contention for a lot of people as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd also love to talk about, I mean, we spoke earlier about trying to reframe conversations about food and like asking to not comment or talk, kind of setting those boundaries with people and having those uncomfortable conversations. But I'd love to talk about like what do you think students can do when they are faced with those comments? Because the facts are they will hear them, whether it be social media or from family, from even strangers. What do you think people can do for themselves when they are receiving those comments to kind of digest those and reframe their mindset?
One of the strategies that has worked pretty well for myself is just trying to be confident in yourself, understanding that people are going to make comments, but what you choose to take in can kind of dictate how you're going to feel. And obviously, it's impossible to hear somebody say, you look this way or you look that way, and not like hear it and internalize it. But having your mindset as this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, I know that about me, and kind of understanding that not every comment has to be taken to heart.
Very well said.
One that I like to do, again, because I think because I'm a dietitian, a lot of people will look down on their food and like tell me, give me whatever reason of that they're eating this food. And I assume you don't have to justify what you're eating. Again, I'm not around you 24/7. I don't know what you ate before, or if you did not eat before. Like, I don't, and again, I don't really care. As long as you're enjoying what you're eating, great, you know? And so you don't have to justify it to me, anyone else. And so I think that can be something if you hear someone talk about like a food they're eating or something, like you don't have to justify, you don't have to give any reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I like to think in spheres of control. You cannot control what people say on social media or strangers, right? You can control what goes on inside your head. And you can have conversations with people that love you about your boundaries. And just, again, it can be as simple as like, you know what? This food and body talk makes me really uncomfortable. I would really like for us to avoid that and then move on, right? Um, in terms of social media, again, paying attention to how you're feeling when you're looking at it, what ends up in your head as a result, um, and just being aware. First of all, becoming aware of what that self-talk is, and then strangers is like, I mean, that's just a general thing. Like, how much am I going to take what these people who I don't know, who don't care about me, saying about me? Like, am I going to take all of their opinions to, you know, and sort of putting it in that case, like, like, why am I going to pay attention to you about this if I wouldn't pay attention to you about career advice, right? So, you don't matter, or what you say doesn't matter in that case. So I think that would be my advice.
Awesome. Well, I think we have time for just one more question. And with that, I would just love to kind of end with where do you think students can seek support, whether that be services, family, or friends? Kind of where can you see those outlets forming?
I think any trusted person, whether that's a friend, family member, that you can confide in, maybe it's someone like a therapist or like at the counseling center, anything like that. maybe it's a professional like a doctor, dietitian, whatever it may be, anyone that you feel like is willing to listen. And I think that also making it clear sometimes why you're going to that person is like, I don't need advice. I just need to talk about this. Or if you do need advice, being like, can you help me? I'm struggling with this. And so I think one, it can be really therapeutic just to get it off your chest. And again, not really seek advice, but just tell someone so someone else knows and can kind of be that person in the conversation if you feel weird, of being like, hey, if they start talking about bodies, can you kind of steer the conversation away? Or, actually getting advice and getting help professionally as well.
Yeah. I don't know, Emily, I don't know, do you know if there are any support groups
We
specifically on Vanderbilt campus?
we have an eating disorder awareness group.
Mm.
I know they've been pretty active in the past. I'm not sure like if they currently still are. But that's the only one I really like can think of off the top of my head, besides obviously like UCC, Student Care Network, things like that.
Yeah. I was just thinking, obviously that's great to have an eating disorder support group, but I was thinking more of like sort of the body liberation sort of mindset or framework of just like something on the more sort of positive side, right? Like if there was like a no diet culture talk kind of support group or diet or something like that. Like just finding like-minded folks, I think is really powerful overall around anything that you're trying to create in the world. And so I just wonder about something more around those, and if it's they always say be the change you want to see in the world, right? If that doesn't exist and this is important to you, then that means that you're the one to create it. So yeah, I think support groups can be a really powerful medium.
I know that, I mean, I'm sure Vanderbilt has something similar, but my university has social work and counseling centers that are available to students for free. And so I think that those and seeing professionals, like Emily was saying, can be a big thing, but even more so, and I'm kind of just like completely just repeating what Emily was saying, but finding trusted people and people that you can be authentic and connect with and have real conversations without, going overboard or having like leaving feeling like your your feelings were invalidated.
Mhm.
Having those people in those groups and those understandings are a great support method.
Most definitely. And I think on top of that, I really like what you said about authenticity specifically. Like, just
Mhm.
being able to be your authentic self, to me, has been the most healing thing. Like, related to any issue I've ever had, like just being able to express that as at a start, like before I even start working on it, just being able to express it has been just a huge step. So even if you can just get to that point with someone who you're close to or a professional, like I think that's just so deeply important. So I really thank you all for bringing that up. But I think that brings us to the end of our time for today. I hope everyone enjoyed. This should be posted both on YouTube and also on our GSC website. If you guys are interested, there's also our episode 1 podcast, which focuses more broadly on mental health topics. And we're also planning to release more webinars in the future. But thank you all for joining our webinar, and I hope you have a great day.